I was very impressed with John's work. John is a freelance journalist who has now become an activist and is a very significant part of this exhibition. He travels the world looking at landmine victims and cluster bomb victims, and is enraged by the use of cluster bombs in the contemporary world. And he is a show unto himself. We could fill the gallery with John's work. And what we've done in this show is actually taken extracts out of John's diaries from southern Lebanon and put up a selection of 15 of his works, and then started to scatter diary extracts underneath the photographs. So you'll get an insight into the condition of southern Lebanon.
The simplest description of what a cluster bomb is a large bomb that's full of lots of little tiny bombs. Now, generally they're delivered by three ways. Either they come from an aircraft, fired by a rocket, or fired with artillery. Inside the larger projectile, there'll be a lot of smaller things you call bomblets. Now, generally in an aircraft bomb, they could carry somewhere between 200 to 600 bomblets. An artillery shell would have about 80 to 90, and one firing of a multiple launch rocket system would have about 7,500. A cluster bomb's a saturation weapon. You fire it, its objective is to rain down over the target and absolutely obliterate what's on the ground. And each single firing covers what you call a footprint, which is about the size of a football field. The problem with cluster munitions is that massive percentages of them fail to operate, fail to function the way they're designed to function, as in explode on the target. So it just means that lots of them sit around armed and in a very unstable, dangerous condition for days, years, months, decades after the war's over. And what that really means is ordinary people come along after the war, find these things, touch them, bump them, drive a vehicle over them, walk on them, and blow themselves to pieces. The war last year in Lebanon was fought over 34 days. It was very short and sharp, and the Israeli military didn't use cluster bombs really until the last 3 days. And in those last 72 hours, they absolutely saturated southern Lebanon with up to 4 million cluster bombs. Now, there weren't the military targets for them to aim at which justified that use. Basically, they blanketed the southern part of Lebanon, which is a scorched earth policy. It creates a dangerous place for ordinary Lebanese to return. They come back to danger. Cleaning up South Lebanon has got a huge problem ahead of it, just sheerly from the numbers of cluster bombs that were put in there. It's simply a matter of dollars. The more money that gets on the ground, the quicker it gets cleaned up, and the quicker you can hand areas back to the community and say it's truly safe and it's truly cleaned up. I was approached by Phillip George to come and get involved with this exhibition that he was doing, which had very much a Lebanese flavour to it. I think he'd heard about the work that I'd been doing in Lebanon, and he contacted me and asked me if I could supply some images. And it's a great venue to just bring people together and say, this is what's going on in Lebanon, please just come and get informed and at least form some sort of opinion. Get out of here thinking about what it's like to be an ordinary person in a place, not just Lebanon, whether it's Afghanistan or Laos or Sudan. Think about what it's like to be in someone else's shoes who has to live through this. When I was working in Lebanon last year, I was keeping a daily diary, and I suppose it's when you write something on the day, it's got a far more flavour and it's got far more feeling and emotion to when you sit back and write it in retrospect, months or years later. So it surprises me when I read some of what I wrote, because it was the little things about what we saw and what we smelt and how we felt in the reporting of what I was doing last year. My job there was one, to do news work, but it was also to do research work for the Norwegian People's Aid, which is one of the big aid agencies, about what the impact on the ground in Lebanon was, and then that information shaped how they were going to respond to that. A lot of what I do is detective work. So you get to southern Lebanon, you find out little snippets of information that there is a person who's been injured, there's been an accident happened in such and such a place, and you just simply go out there and you start beating the pavement to try and find who these people are and what's going on. And I went and I found this woman whose son had been killed by a cluster bomb. They'd survived the war, they'd come out of hiding. They came out on the street just after the ceasefire was announced, and her 11-year-old son just touched this little nothing-shaped thing. And it's like the size of a D-cell battery, and exploded, killing him and killing one of his uncles and wounding 5 of their family. She's devastated. Her whole life, I mean, she's a typical loving mother, just like you've got a loving mother, who would be absolutely distraught to lose her son. Can you imagine being in the street, having your 11-year-old boy just get disemboweled and holding him, and he still had a few words left in him, and he passes away in her arms? Can you imagine what that's like and what she's now got to live with? It's a horrendous thing. We'll magnify that by every single injury that's happened in Lebanon since this war's been on, but magnify that through every conflict that's ever gone. It's innocent people who come back and get affected by the way that wars are fought and get injured and get killed. It's not fair, it's not right. I see people who've got nothing to do with the conflict, whether who are just trying to survive, they're just trying to put food on the table and a roof over their heads and get along on life with their family. And these conflicts overshadow them, they just run them down, and they put them at danger, and it costs them their lives. And quite simply, it's wrong. Now, I'm lucky, I choose to be in these places. I choose to come, I choose to go. That's a good privilege for me, but what I do choose to do is to try and be a little bit of a conduit of information from where there's a problem to where there can potentially be a solution. I do find it unforgivable that you can choose to do this in a military sense, you can choose to shoot the hell out of people in this way and leave them with a salted earth situation. This is not an accident. You know this is going to be the response to it. So I do not forgive the people who choose to use these weapons. They're fools. They know better. They know this is what's going to be the result, so I don't forgive them.